Good afternoon. I know a few of you are still just signing in, so we'll just start with the intro and then the speakers will start in a minute. So good afternoon and welcome to the 7th in our series of virtual roadshows on our new relationship with the EU. Our last session looked at product labelling and how to properly navigate the rules. Today, we'll look at freight and logistics and how it's been impacted by our new partnership with the EU. Firstly, we'll hear from Alex Veitch, who's Head of Global Policy for Logistics UK, and then from David Elvey, Head of Future Freight Strategy at DFT. There'll be a short Q&A session after each of the presentations. But before we begin, just a very few quick housekeeping items to note. All attendees are in listening mode only, and only the panelists' videos are visible. If you want to engage with the panelists or to ask a question, please do so by typing your question into the Q&A box in the Zoom control bar at the bottom of your screen. Aaron, Moran and I will be moderating any questions during the Q&A session, which will follow each of our presentations today. Now, we're not using the chat function because we're not able to download that after the event and make sure all your questions are answered. So if you would please note to use the Q&A function instead, because that way we can make sure everybody gets their question answered. Finally, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website afterwards, and all attendees will be receiving the slides from today in their after pack. So with no further ado, please let me hand over to Alex Veitch. Thank you ever so much, Alex.
Thanks, Hilary. And good afternoon, everybody. Now, let me quickly share my screen. Share. Okay. Could I just ask Aaron or Hilary to confirm that the slides are visible to you?
That's perfect.
Yes, they are.
Brilliant. And they're moving okay?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alex Veitch, and I lead our public policy work at Logistics UK, by which we mean the positions on policies that we take to the government and to the media on behalf of our members. I'm going to speak, I know there's some very exact timings here, which is always great. I may come in a little bit ahead of time, depending how we go. I'm going to cover the TCA, the free trade agreement with the EU at a high level. I'm going to talk about export to the EU, washing up what we've learned so far, feedback we've had. I'm going to talk about GB to Northern Ireland trade, and then I'm going to finish up with what we expect from the changes that are coming in from the 1st of April and then again from the 1st of July. And ahead of that, you'll forgive me for doing a little bit of a show and tell about who we are. We changed our name last summer from Freight Transport Association, FTA, to Logistics UK. Our association's been going nearly 100 years. We are a large business group in logistics. We have over 18,000 members across all the modes, road hauliers, ports, airports, rail operators, freight forwarders, customs agents, and also shippers, what we call shippers, i.e. manufacturers, retailers, and other companies who ship goods around. So we tend to work with the in-house logistics and customs teams with a number of shippers. So we have quite a good balanced perspective, and we try really, really hard not to just be partial and only speak about one part of the industry. A little bit about the logistics sector. I won't dwell on this, but you know, it's the sector is to support you. You know, our members move your goods around, and the health of the logistics sector is reasonably good. One of a suite of indicators of the health of the broader economy. Okay, enough about that. Trade and cooperation agreement. So you may have seen this already, but the Office of Budget Responsibility has done quite a good summary of the deal and how it relates to a typical free trade agreement. I think the ones that I would pick out as a logistics person is that the deal includes the provisions on the movement of trucks and the movement of planes. Normally, those aren't included in a trade deal. And this is why we were so worried about no deal, because if there was no deal, that would have meant a very bleak and difficult picture particularly for trucks, getting them across the borders. So we were hugely relieved the deal was done. Some of the things you'd expect to find in a free trade agreement are, of course, here rules of origin, which I'll speak about, which I know has caused a lot of headaches in your sectors, customs administration, checks around food security and hygiene. And then where I think things are very unclear are in some of the service sectors, financial services, real lack of clarity there as well. But the headlines really are around zero tariffs on traded goods, with the pretty huge caveat that rules of origin are then required, and of course customs arrangements as well. I'll do this quickly. I do want to share with this audience some of the ways in which international road haulage has changed. And before you all switch off and go to sleep, it does matter, because this may explain potentially some of the changes you may have seen if you're moving goods to and from the EU. So before the 1st of January this year, you could make a larger number of stops inside an EU member state if you're a British company than you can today, and vice versa. So there are rules called cabotage, which govern the amount of commercial journeys that a road freight operator can make inside another country. Now, why am I telling you this? The reason is that the ability of UK hauliers going to the EU, picking up a few jobs there and coming back, or conversely, a European haulier coming to us, picking up a few jobs and going back, is one of the drivers for the number of international haulage firms that exist that are willing to do that kind of work. And it was one of our big asks about the trade negotiation, because it was not a given that you'd even be able to go, drop something off, pick up a load and come back. But that has been agreed. And so this more or less protects the business case for international hauliers to do what they do. I mean, it's not a very fun job. You're on the road for days and days at a time. You can get caught up in borders, as you know. So it's very important to keep this reasonably good provision for international haulage. The sector that's come completely unstuck with this, though, is the cultural sector and the Formula One sectors, where you may have seen this in the media. Touring companies, bands, F1, are really worried because they rely on logistics firms having almost unlimited stops all around the EU. I'm not going to talk about that today. I've made a executive decision that that's the wrong audience. So I'm going to assume that none of you are in that particular space, but if you are, please ask a question, because I'm happy to take questions on that. But that is very difficult. And we're hoping that there'll be a special resolution on that. We'll be speaking to DFT and other departments about as well. Aviation rights, also relevant because it controls the access that you as manufacturers have to air freight. This was, I think, okay, room to grow. It protects the essentials of air cargo. The tricky thing with air freight is it's really closely linked with passenger. So in our country, 60% of air freight is moved in the belly hold of passenger aircraft. So the more liberalised and healthy the passenger economy is, but for long haul particularly, the better for air freight. For European internal movements, air freight is typically done by freighters rather than in belly hold. But the same principle applies. More liberalisation is better for everybody. And so we want to see a more liberalised approach. We think this is a build on the agreement, and it may actually involve bilateral agreements with EU member states from now on, as we're not quite sure whether EU themselves want to go with it corporately. So I'll move on now, but I did want to share with you those top lines about the ability for international international logistics firms to actually do the basic job and serve their customers. Okay. So a couple of slides just on process and procedures. I'm going to take home from this, and you may have got this from other Make UK webinars already, is that the deal sets out not only the basic rules, but also how they can be potentially improved through various trade partnership arrangements and specialised committees. So we will obviously engage as soon as we possibly can in the ones related to logistics. I'm sure Make UK will be right there at the table as well for all things to do with manufacturing. So I think, you know, we are where we are today. Some of the rules are here forever, but there may well be opportunities to amend, to change, to build on things. But I would say this will be a medium to long-term prospect rather than a short-term. There'll be consultation with the broader, what we call civil society, so business NGOs like ours and many others, trade unions and others. And then I'm sure, you know, mirror groups, so groups within government that will take views of UK businesses and take them back to the EU, and the same on the other side. Right, so I'm going to get into some of the nuts and bolts now about customs, tariffs and rules of origin. At a high level, you can claim zero tariffs if the goods were made in the UK or the EU. If the goods were made entirely outside of those two territories, you cannot claim zero tariffs. Now, then things get very complicated. And those of you on this webinar, you know, you're here for a reason. I'm sure you've maybe pulling your hair out. If unlike me, you've got hair to pull out on some of the rules now. This is where it gets very difficult, certainly for our association, to give specific advice. I did earlier this year look through the TCA provisions on rules of origin. It's one of the most complicated parts of the agreement. I think it's probably the longest single part of it. And it seems to me it's very sector specific, and it would probably be causing mayhem if I tried to give a detailed guidance on rules of origin for every sector. I think Make UK is your best bet for that rather than us. But what I could say is a word or two about how to make customs a little bit easier. So if you are a regular trader with the EU, I would recommend having a look at a procedure called customs transit. This is something where you can essentially, the border almost gets moved inland for customs. So you can take it either to a site, or if you're doing it at a very regular basis, you can do it from your premises. If you get authorised, you can declare the goods into customs, stick it in the truck, they go through the border with the minimal fuss from the customs authorities, and they can get declared out of customs inland, either at a special site or maybe at your customer's premises or your buyer's premises. So customs transit is well worth a look. It's also a way to avoid some of what we call double duty. So we've had this quite a bit of interaction with businesses that buy finished products from outside the EU and sell them, particularly B2C, to the EU, or conversely the other direction, where they've been paying duty to bring them into the UK, but then because they're not made in UK, they're liable for duty going to the EU as well, so double duty. There are ways you can use the transit procedures to reduce the number of times you pay duties as well. So customs transit, if you remember one thing from this, please remember that, it's really important. And also there is some complicated rules that are probably worth looking into about where the products are from, whether there is a trade preference agreement with the suppliers, the country of your supplier that may be usable as you tot up the amount of customs duty you owe. Again, so preference agreements are worth a look. From the point of view of the trade paperwork side, which is where we do most of our work, I wanted to flag that you do, as the importer, have responsibility for rules of origin. You can claim your zero tariffs via an import declaration, or you can reclaim it at a later date. You must keep records for 3 years. There is currently, I know things are very complicated already, but they're going to get more complicated next year, because as things stand, you don't have to produce what's called a Supplier Declaration, which shows that your suppliers to the product are also able to make use of rules of origin, or at least say that they're not. You don't actually have to do a Suppliers Declaration this calendar year, but that's coming in, so again, worth a look. And something that I think went under the radar for a lot of people. I don't know if anyone on this call is in the parcel space, so I'll just mention it quickly and move on. But there is a threshold by which you don't need to do this at all if you're in the parcels game. It's you can see on the screen the figures for lower value consignments. And the UK has been a bit more generous than this on the EU side, but that's something of use to a lot of businesses that we deal with. Again, I'll mention this quickly, happy to come back to it later if there's time, but something that I know has caught a lot of people out, particularly on B2C flows, is import VAT that started being applied. You know, people have to pay it, simple as that, and it's a policy change the government were always going to bring in. I think they brought it in slightly on the quiet, but I know we've had feedback, people sending me invoices, what's this, why am I paying import VAT? Well, you've got to pay it, you know, and I wonder if that's something that you guys are experiencing as well. But the rules are that the rules are the rules. Other points to note from the point of view of trade procedures, there's a very interesting system called AEO, or Authorised Economic Operator, which is a security and customs trusted trader scheme that's recognised internationally by many of the countries with which we trade in and beyond the EU, where if you are a regular international trader, and I include the EU in that, probably for the bigger end, more advanced end of things, that may be worth looking at, particularly if you're moving goods that have some security implications, because in the future that may be a way to reduce some of the friction at the borders you might be experiencing. And it's also going to be ways for authorities to cooperate and exchange on customs. Okay, so the last, I suppose, technical policy part to go into, and I'll keep this one quick, I promise, is something called Safety and Security Declarations. So you may or may not know that there are two things you have to declare. You have to do a customs declaration, and you have to do something called safety and security declarations as well. This may well be something your customs intermediary just deals with for you, may be invisible to you, others may do it yourselves. There's currently a waiver for some of this if you're going outbound to the EU. And there's currently also a grace period until the 1st of July for inbound flows. But without wanting to get into the detail of it, please watch out for this. Whether you're an importer or an exporter, please take the time to work out who is going to do your safety and security declarations from the 1st of July, whether import exporter. It should be typically on either your customs agent, your customs intermediary, or your freight forwarder who may be acting in that capacity. It can be done by the haulier as well. But there things get a bit more tricky. So again, something to reflect on is, if you haven't come across this before, please do take this away as homework and look at how you're going to handle S&S requirements, because it may just be something that creeps up on you on the 1st of July. Okay, so stock take, where we are now for exports to the EU. The rest of the slide pack, by the way, is less heavy on the content, you'd be pleased to hear, no doubt. So, right, what's going on? It's a very, I suppose, interesting and a little bit confusing picture in a minute. So, I said earlier that logistics is one of the metrics for economic health. It's not the only one, and what's happening at the border kind of shows why. So we do know that the flow of trucks through Dover, around Dover, as this slide says, has more or less returned to normal levels. And we also know we haven't seen the traffic delays that we were worried would happen as a result of Brexit. That hasn't happened. Anyway, but that doesn't mean the economy is doing fine, right? And this is something that I'll be curious to get feedback on from Make UK members. What do we know? The government has said that empty trucks on the export side are up from around about 30% to around about 50%. This issue's caused quite a lot of discussion in our sector, but I think what the media don't always say is that there are always about a third of the trucks are always empty pre-Brexit. So it's not a new thing. We just have an imbalance of trade, you know. So it's gone up, and we are tomorrow expecting the Office of National Statistics to release data on trade for January, where I think we'll get better data than this, and we'll see what's really going on to some extent. We also know that many businesses, particularly small and medium enterprises, have raised a lot of issues, of problems they've had. We've had a fair bit of that ourselves, various calls, government committees that we sit on, we've had that, and in the media's really picked up on this. Now we think that is not a huge surprise. We know that the government targeted a lot of communications activity at what they call high value traders, which is 10 to 12,000 businesses who account for a very, very, very high proportion of EU trade. So it's actually not a big surprise to us that the SMEs have had more difficulties, because I don't think they've had the same level of outreach of government. I don't think that's unfair to say. There are loads and loads of them, so it's actually very, very hard and very expensive for government to do that level of comms activity. It's also typically just more impactful for a smaller business to A, engage with the detail in this, and then B, actually work out how you are going to do these kind of shipments. It's not easy, I know that. Even for larger SMEs, if I can call it that, it's just not easy. And certainly anecdotal feedback indicates that there are some companies that are pausing on exports at the moment. So, you know, it shows that you have to look a bit more broadly, I suppose, at what's happening, and also shows that we as our sector need to do everything we can to support you to make this work as well as it can. We do a number of surveys of our members. You know, we have seen quite a high proportion of our members impacted by Brexit. We survey, you know, logistics operators, but also, as I said earlier, manufacturers and retailers if they're in membership as well. And you know, there's quite a lot to unpack here, but suffice to say, we will be repeating this and trying to work out some more detail around what they mean, but also we'll be very curious to see how much this shakes out through January, February time, and how much is persistent and shows you know, systemic economic impacts of Brexit. So I just want to pick up on some specific points to give you a flavour of the kind of issues we've had. Transit I spoke about before. We've got technical problems there that seem to have been resolved now. There's a new system called GVMS that all hauliers will have to use from the 1st of July. It's being used for Northern Ireland flows. You know, without getting into that for this call, there were some teething problems with it, but it's working okay now. EU ports, probably don't know this, hauliers have to log in and use and be able to use a different IT system for every single EU country they move goods to. So you could be up to 5 or 6, depending how many countries you trade with. The Irish system had some issues in January, which caused quite a lot of problems, but we think that's broadly okay. I talked earlier about transit and businesses getting authorised to declare goods into transit at their premises. HMRC have ramped up their ability to help guide companies in how to do that. It's not terribly easy to do. We've had some reports of that being quite a slow process still, so we're on the case with HMRC. Touring companies I mentioned briefly before, customs intermediaries or customs agents. What we had there was interesting. We had feedback that a lot of companies needed someone on the phone to talk them through really essentially what they needed to do. Customs agents were very busy in January, I'm sure they're busy now, and there seemed to be a disconnect between sort of what customers wanted and needed and versus what was available. I'll be curious to see how that's working for you now, whether that's improved. For the record, the government has thrown a lot of money at boosting capacity in the customs intermediary sector. £84 million of grants has gone this way. So we're not calling for more funding for that sector particularly, we're not against it. but there are a lot of support mechanisms out there for business to support and get ready and train for Brexit. SMEs, I said before, more issues than larger shippers. Double duty, again, I touched on this. This is catching people out, double duty, and import that, again, something I didn't think a lot of people knew was happening, but particularly for B2C, has really caught people by surprise and increased costs. Okay, the new normal. This is with us forever now, folks. That's the thing. You'll be pleased to hear I don't intend to talk through every green box, but where you sit as manufacturers is here, the pre-export steps. This is from a very handy document from the government called the Border Operating Model, which I'm sure Make UK folks can make available. It's online. And this just talks through in a very clear way how the export process works. There's another one for imports I'll come to quickly later. And it's all about you as the manufacturer, you as the exporter, that with your exporter hat on, what you need to do and when. And then there's a lot of detail around this about what is exact, what are all these declarations, what are they, what do you need to do, how do you prepare, where do you need a customs agent for? And I would recommend this product. It's a very strong piece of work by the government. And I'm sure we have the slide pack as well to review. Imports. Right, big one for imports is if you are an importer, you may have seen very little change, or quite a lot, you know, I don't know, but certainly from our point of view as the logistics providers, very little has changed on the ground, because the UK has decided to provide a 6-month period by which it will not be doing any customs checks at the border, and it will not be requiring safety and security declarations either for that period. So that will all come into play from the 1st of January. We have had a while to get ready as logistics folks. I think the trick to all this is, will our members' customs be ready? So you as importers, your partners who will be exporters to you, are both sides going to be able to do the correct declarations so that there are no delays at the border for your product. That is really important to land with this group today. There will be an initial introduction of some border controls in April for some types of food product. I'm not going to talk about that today. I've made, again, an executive decision that we don't have many food companies on the call. If that's not the case, please say in the chat and I'll come back to this. But suffice to say, this is quite complicated. We are wrestling with this at the moment. Things that will change in April. How can we make sure that hauliers are ready? How can we work with a broader supply chain so that food manufacturers and buyers are ready to do what they need to do from 1st of April? So I would expect a bit of friction at the border, but I don't expect that to be bad enough to delay all shipments. But that will cause a few ripples. And in 1st of July, the whole shebang of checks and declarations on both customs and all kinds of regulated food products and plant products, all that stuff kicks in 1st of July. So that is going to be a really key and busy month for both you and us, I suspect. Okay, and again, this is a similar slide, but switch the other way. This is the new normal for imports. There is no escape from this. UK government has chosen its way out the customs union, out of the single market. This locks us into these complicated procedures. It's not a political point, it is just factual. So as an importer, there are several things you do need to do to make sure you've got the right tariff information. You've got to make sure that you're paying the right duties if you're paying them. If you're not paying them, you've got to prove that you're eligible for using rules of origin. You know, you've got to work out how you're going to pay it. You don't have to pay customs duty in one go. You can defer it for a month, but you have to be authorized to do it. It is not easy, but I'm afraid it's unavoidable. And the more you do it, I suppose, the less complicated it gets. And there is some reasonably good support available through various sources for this, I think. Okay. Northern Ireland Protocol, I'll perhaps speed up a little bit. Key points. We've seen quite a bit of disruption in January because of food, primarily. I won't go into food issues on this call anymore, but that seems to have bedded down quite well now. We're not seeing the kind of issues we had before, although the rules are about to get much tighter later in the year. Customs, the government has, if you're a business that trades with NI from GB to NI, You can take advantage of the trader support service that will essentially help you do your paperwork for you, customs and safety, security and food. This has been a bit easier for some of the retail food products and for parcels. Actually, sorry, the slide needs to be updated because the easements I mentioned there have been extended to the 1st of October from the 1st of April. Shows you how fast things move. So that's made the trade a bit easier for Northern Ireland. And I think one thing that I would just flag is that the protocol is not a permanent structure. It's not given necessarily. We want it to stay, of course. It does have to be regularly agreed to by Northern Ireland Assembly. And I think we see a worrying amount of instability politically at the moment around this. And we can only hope that the powers that be find a solution that makes a sustainable proposition for how to move goods, both buy and sell goods between GB and NI, a reality. Okay, I won't go into this too much, other than that, like Make UK, we're part of the Brexit Business Task Force, which has a NI protocol subgroup, which is a very useful way for you guys through Make UK, rather than us to make any representations around what's happening with the Northern Ireland Protocol. And again, actually, one thing I do want to flag with manufacturers is we've heard slightly secondhand from manufacturers that have sites in both GB and NI, worries, concerns around how to avoid paying duty when they move products around between each site potentially. And so, as a bit of a customs policy geek, there are some ways that you can avoid paying duty if you can show that you're manufacturing goods for re-export. So you can either bring them in, work on them and send them back, or you can send them out, have them worked on by someone else and bring them back. Those are called inward and outward processing. Conscious I've probably lost all the audience at this point. Suffice to say that it's worth looking into that, because it's difficult to get authorised. Once you are, there are some fairly clever ways that you can avoid some of the customs implications of that kind of complicated cross-border supply chain work. Okay, that's it. Hilary, Aaron, back to you, and happy to take questions. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks ever so much, Alex. So we've got some questions through on the Q&A just now. We'll start with quite a long one, so with apologies, but will a supplier declaration be valid once the waiver period ends? So this person's understanding of the TCA was that the REX number being shown on the supplier invoice was the only mechanism through which the UK importer could evidence preference. Obviously, this is quite limiting because not all EU suppliers will be willing to apply for REX. Any clarification or insights as to the practical mechanism for claiming preference long-term would be useful?
Yes, it would, wouldn't it? That's an excellent question. Okay, I know this has been recorded. I just really don't want to give the wrong answer. I hadn't understood that REX is registered exporter. I hadn't understood that was the only way to comply. The questioner may well be right, but all of our members will be really interested in that as well. So I would like to take an action to look at that and come back to you, please. Okay,
super. So we'll pick that up afterwards, and we can go back and we'll pop the answer in the pack that goes out to everybody who's on the call. So thank you for that question, Aaron.
Next question. If our carriers have AEO status, will they be likely to be using customs transit anyway? You're on mute, Alex.
Sorry about that. Not necessarily. AEO is an interesting scheme whereby if you get authorised as AEO, it's a bit like the trunk of a tree. That takes you through a lot of qualifying stages with government, with HMRC, that then make it easier and quicker for you to add on branches of the tree, which are different types of smaller customs trusted trader schemes. So if you're an AEO, it means you're approved to a certain level, and then you don't then have to reapply, you don't have to recertify every single thing again to be authorised to use transit. or to be authorised to use the inward and outward processing that I talked about briefly earlier, or to simplify customs declarations. It's a little bit easier than that. So you may well be using transit, but it's not. The two are not necessarily linked. So
okay, next question. Thanks you very much, Alex, for that. Are you able to advise how import duty and VAT is applied on a shipment from Germany to Ireland and then to GB? Is the VAT payable at the German rate of 19% or the UK rate of 20%?
Hilary, so would you mind saying that again? I'm just having a little bit of interference in mind, which I'm trying to solve in the meantime.
Okay, no problem. Are you able to advise how import duty and VAT is applied on a shipment from Germany to Ireland and then on to GB? Is the VAT payable at the German rate of 90% or the UK rate of 20%?
Sorry, folks. Wonders with technology. No, I'm not. I'm not on a recorded webinar like this. I'm sorry. I'll have to take that away.
Okay. Again, we'll come back to that one.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Aaron.
Perfect. We are struggling to get goods to a warehouse in a third country to either a UK or European customer. Now triangulation isn't an option. Are there any solutions?
Okay. Give it to me one more time, Aaron.
We are struggling to get goods to a warehouse in a third country to either a UK or European customer. Now triangulation isn't an option.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Or triangulation, there's a bit of jargon called cumulation, which may be the same thing as the question is referring to. So yeah, you know, you could say if you've got a free trade agreement with a third country, you can sort of use that to help reduce your customs liability in the UK and EU, and that was something which we and many others wanted to see in the TCA and didn't get. I suppose I don't know if this helps or not, but the rules of origin side, I don't think so. Just if that's the intention of the question. The part I would say is I talked a bit about customs transit with capital T, that there are ways to physically move goods from a third country to the EU and to the UK, where you can avoid paying duty both times when it gets to the UK and the EU. So we're part of something called the Common Transit Convention that allows us to do that. But that's not really, I think, the intention of the question, which is about duty being paid at the time. But I think that's some advice we've been given to members that are caught in this double duty trap. If that helps.
Yeah. No, thank you.
How many stops can my delivery driver make into the EU, and can he or she stop at multiple member states, please?
Right, without checking back to my slide, it's you can go pick something up and come back. You can go pick something up and do 2 jobs and come back. And I think it is, and for the last bit, if you're sending around the slides, there's some clarity in that about the number of EU member states that you can go to. I think you can stop in one and then another one, and then you have to come back. I think that's how it works. Or you can do 2 in one member state, I think.
Okay, thank you. Aaron?
During your presentation, you mentioned the parcels exemption thresholds. What is the definition of a parcel in this presentation? Yeah,
I mean, it's intended for parcels and post as well. I'd have to check exactly what's in the TCA, but I took that direct from gov.uk guidance actually. So it's an interesting question. What's the definition of a parcel in this space? It is what I've said it is in the slide, according to the government. It's really a value point. So is it, and I think it's probably also parcel would mean B2C transaction rather than B2B. So I hope that helps, and it's worth checking the guidance if you're looking to take advantage of that.
Super, thanks ever so much. I think we'll ask you one more question, and to make sure that we can actually divvy up the questions a bit fairly. So would my UK driving licence driving commercial goods be valid in the EU?
Not on its own, no. You'd have to get an international driving permit as well. If you're a commercial driver, your CPC, drive certificate of professional competence, I think David might want to come in on this actually as well. I think that's been recognised. I think I'll double check that, but it's not massively onerous, but you definitely need an IDP, international driving permit.
Okay, super. Aaron, would be one more from you, and then we'll pass on to David, if you can do that, please.
So you mentioned AEO status in your slides and the presentation. What could you give a bit more information around what it is and how long does it take to obtain?
Right. So AEO is a, in a nutshell, it started off as a reaction to the September 11th attacks in the USA, and where there was a very obvious and apparent need to increase the security of the supply chain. Now, of course, that happened on a passenger aircraft, but a number of terrorist threats are actually related to freight. And so there is a global enterprise called the SAFE framework, SAFE framework, whereby lots and lots of different countries in and out of the EU, doesn't matter, come together to say, how can we get better security in our freight supply chains? And so the AEO acronym, Authorised Economic Operator, stems from that originally, and it's become a set of actual legal rules in Europe, mirrored in the USA, many of our other big trading partners, that say if you can tick all these boxes about the safety and security of operations, you can get AEO accreditation, and that would mean that you are, it doesn't give you quicker border movements as such. What it means is that if your goods get selected for a control, for an intervention at the border in a country where AEO is recognised, out of all the movement, out of all the shipments that get selected, yours gets preferential treatment when that happens. It doesn't mean that you kind of get a free pass. So the government's always very clear about that kind of thing. AEO and the EU, in their infinite wisdom, set this up in a really, really complicated way. So you've got AEO-S, which is the security and safety bit, and that's recognised internationally. That's quite tricky to get. To be fair, you do have to show lots of security arrangements. This kind of thing is used all the time in air freight. There are some very equivalent standards that a lot of air freight forwarders and air operators and frequent air shippers use as well. And it's all about, it goes up to kind of height of defence, background checks on the staff that touch the product. But they're worth looking into if you're doing a lot of air freight, because you can theoretically move stuff from your premises straight to the plane. But it's proper high security stuff. And AEOS is kind of in that space. The other AEO is AEOC for customs, where this is where you prove to the government that you're a trusted, compliant trader when it comes to customs. So you have to show 3 years of records of compliance. You've got to show competence. You've got to show that you're a good person. You're a good player in this game. Once you can get that, you can get some benefits around that. I won't go into it, a little bit geeky, but you can get cheaper guarantees, lower amount of customs guarantees, but doesn't matter for this cost, I suppose. But then, as well as getting some benefits just from getting it, you don't then have to reauthorize yourself for every individual customs trusted trader scheme that you want, of which there are about 20. So for this audience, if you've got AEOC already, when you go to say, right, I want to certify my premises as transit, so I can take everything from my factory straight to the border. If you're an AEO, you do probably half the paperwork, because you've actually you're already approved into a certain extent. You're known to HMRC. If you haven't got AEO, you do everything that you would have had to do AEO, most of it, to get to AEO and do it again. And then if you want to do, right, I've got transit, I want to do clever stuff about inward and outward processing, you don't have to do the whole application for IP and OP, because you've done the AEO, so that you just do the add-on, So our members who are actually bigger, frankly, do a lot more international. They go for this because it means it just makes it easier for them in the long term, and they can get some financial benefits too. So that wasn't really a nutshell. That was a big nutshell. I appreciate that. But you did ask the questions, so there you go.
No, really helpful. Thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you very much, Alex, for that really detailed answer. It was really, really useful. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and we'll pick up